Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is urging the United Nations Security Council to act against Russia over air attacks on civilian infrastructure that have again plunged Ukrainian cities into darkness and cold as winter sets in. Russia unleashed a missile barrage across Ukraine on Wednesday, killing 10 people, forcing shutdowns on nuclear power plants, cutting water and electricity supply in many places. The Council is unlikely to take any action in response to the appeal by President Zelensky, since Russia is a member with veto power. The United States ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, says the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, was clearly weaponizing winter to inflict immense suffering on the Ukrainian people. Further south, Russian forces are digging in on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River, shelling areas on the west bank, including the town of Kherson, which was recently reclaimed by Ukrainian forces. Meanwhile, a high-rise building in Vyshovod has been hit by a rocket. The head of the Kyiv region, Olesik Kuleba, says about 4 people have been killed and 34 injured, amongst them 5 children in the Kyiv region. And as the tension continues, the city of Kharkiv is still without electricity. However, the head of the regional military administration says that due to damage to the general system in the region, emergency blackouts are being applied, and this is a necessary step to protect power grids. The regional authorities reported that energy companies are currently working on restoring power supply, although they have not yet said when it will be achieved.
Let's go back to our earlier conversation with the chairman, Nigerians in Diaspora, Russia, Dr. Godwin Ibe, who is joining me from Moscow. Let's pick it from where we left off. I was asking, trying to find out your opinion as regards what President Zelensky said. He described the latest war as crime against humanity, and that's talking about the Russia attack. What is your reading of this recent development on the war?
Yes, there are lots of statements that have been said by both sides, both the Russian side and the Ukraine side. Taking only one side will put it out of perspective. It's always good to get both sides, as it's a war, as it takes 2 to tango. Now, for every war, there's always economic, geopolitical, and social costs. And the economic cost, for example, in Ukraine, we can see 50% of the economy is gone, basically, at least maybe 40, 50%. There are lots of loans. There's inflation, which is also in Russia. We have global inflation in Russia, in Ukraine. And then you can talk about the social aspect, for example, loss of disposable income, difficulty meeting needs, and more people going into extreme poverty. And at the same time, the people who are blowing up the war, who are sponsoring the war, whether it's supplying weapons or, the rhetorics to conflagrate the war or make it worse, they also might have vested interest. We know the industrial military complex is worth trillions of dollars. We also know that there's people who are invested in supply of goods or even weapons to the war front. So war generally is both catastrophic, both to the soldiers, to the civilians, the family of both the soldiers and the civilians. So one side saying it's bad, it's a crime against humanity, it's a one-sided inflammatory rhetoric. War is bad, whether it's Peter or Paul, and it takes 2 to tango. I believe that dialogue should be the way to find a solution to the problem. And of course, you should take into account the national interests and both strategic and tactical interests of both parties so that they can be able to reach a peaceful agreement that lasts. And of course, there can be no peace without justice. Right. The justice of Ukrainian civilians is as important as those of Donetsk, Lugansk, and all the other republics.
Well, this doesn't take away the fact that the latest attacks came moments after the European Parliament declared Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. So what implication do you think this declaration would have on Russia and its war against Ukraine?
Like I said, it's a one-sided declaration. You consider what the Ukrainian parliament have said, but Russian parliament have also said a lot of things, including considering some people, some journalists, some politicians, giving them personal non grata and not calling them enemies of the state and others. So one-sided opinions or declarations can go that far, especially in a military conflict. It's always good to put aside all these rhetorics and to try to encourage everyone to come to the table, because one-sided rhetorics can't take anybody anywhere, while the costs of the war are multiplying every day.
Even though your advocacy is just to ensure that this war is actually brought to an end, but then United States ambassador to the UN said Putin was clearly weaponizing winter to inflict immense suffering on the Ukrainian people and will try to freeze the country into submission. So could this mean that the current weather situation is now in Moscow's advantage against Russia, at least in the meantime, before a resolution is actually, gotten?
You've quoted 3 people, but all the 3 sources are all Western sources. You haven't quoted any Eastern source. Once again, you need to take into account both parties to encourage them to come to the dialogue. The United States are on the Ukrainian side, so they can make any statement. Russia has also made a statement. Anyone can weaponize the war. People who are benefiting economically, of course, have every incentive to weaponize it, whether they are selling weapons or giving land lease deals or whatever deals they are getting. They are, of course, they have motivation to make the war last as long as possible. The people who you should listen to are the people who, or both people who are involved, who are fighting, and the families who both want a peace agreement and understand that the earlier that a peaceful solution is found, the better for everybody, basically.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how the whole thing, continue to pan out. Well, whether dialogue is ongoing or maybe it's actually successful, we'll continue to monitor these events as they unfold. Chairman, Nigerians in Diaspora, Russia, Dr. Godwin Ibe, thank you so much. You joined us from Moscow. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.